What's going on, everyone? I hope you're good. It's a little incredible that this is still an ongoing issue, and there are obviously some days that are more kinetic than others. And I want to take the opportunity to address an aspect of this whole thing, but it's an aspect that if you're in public safety or preparedness minded, it's an aspect that we can all witness and learn from and plan and prepare for. And I'm talking about something that affects anyone who operates for long periods in a high stress or high threat environment, whether you're a responder, a communicator, a volunteer, or someone who just finds themselves in a situation that just doesn't let up. I'm talking about cognitive fatigue and performance decline, the slow, invisible erosion of awareness, decision-making, and emotional control that happens when the brain is pushed past its sustainable limits. And to understand why this matters and why it's relevant, I want to anchor all of this in something real. And I'm talking about the ICE protests in Minneapolis. These events haven't, unfolded over minutes. They seem to be just going on without end. And this environment is dynamic. The emotional temperature we know is extremely high, and the actual temperature is brutally cold. And that cold is a whole lot more than just uncomfortable. It is a physiological and cognitive force multiplier, because the ICE agents on the ground, they aren't just dealing with the crowd. They are dealing with uncertainty, or threat potential is probably a better way to describe it. And they're also dealing with the cold on top of all that. And this is the kind of cold that slowly drains your fine motor skills, your reaction time, your situational awareness, and your ability to think clearly. It's the kind of cold that makes you burn energy faster. It narrows attention, it slows the brain's processing speed, and it really makes emotional regulation harder. And when you combine cold with stress, with duration, with uncertainty, or constant threat, you get a perfect storm for performance decline. And the same thing would apply to you if you ever find yourself operating for an extended period, whether it be a protest, a search effort, a winter storm response, or some sort of long duration call out. The environment will shape your awareness, your communication, your decisions, and your emotional responses in real time. That is why this episode matters, because cognitive fatigue, it doesn't announce itself like some of the other things we run into. This creeps in quietly, and the extreme colds, that speeds the process up. So I want to break down what cognitive fatigue actually is, how it builds, how the cold accelerates it, how it changes your awareness, how it shows up physically and emotionally, and how you can recognize it early in yourself and in the people around you. So let's get into it. So cognitive fatigue is the decline in mental performance that happens when the brain has been working hard for an extended period. This isn't just, physical exhaustion. This isn't being sleepy. This is the brain running low on processing capacity. Think of it like mental bandwidth. You only have so much. And when you're processing information, making decisions, scanning your environment, managing stress, or dealing with any sort of uncertainty, you're burning cognitive resources. And eventually, those resources run low. When that happens, your awareness starts to drop. People become slower. People become less observant, more reactive, and therefore they are more prone to making mistakes. And during the Minneapolis protest, you could see this play out on both ends, I feel. Early in the day, everybody's out there. People are deliberate, they're communicative, they're aware. But as the hours stretch and the cold and the noise and the emotional load, you can almost start to see the shift. People aren't seeing things the same way that they may have been seeing them earlier. They're not processing the same way. And that's cognitive fatigue, and it affects anyone and everyone. These protesters, they're running coordinated psychological operations playbooks, and the environments that they are able to, create, they produce predictable cognitive stressors that degrade awareness, decision-making, and emotional regulation. And I want to start to, just break down the environmental, behavioral, and situational factors that contributed to cognitive overload for the ICE agents during these protesters, and the same factors that would affect any team operating in a prolonged, high stress, high uncertainty environment. Long duration events are one of the most powerful drivers of cognitive fatigue. Protests, which if you've ever been involved with them, we know they can often stretch for hours or days, and that alone creates sustained vigilance, demand no predictable endpoint. There's constant uncertainty. There's no natural decompression cycles. And all of that solely drains your cognitive bandwidth. The longer the event, the more the people who are involved in it, their awareness is going to drop. Large protests create high noise, high motion, high stimulus. All of that forms the environment. The protesters, they like to chant and bang drums and use sirens, and as well as use vehicles. And there's movement in every direction. There's flashing lights, there's people entering, there's people exiting. And then, then there's the crowd and sudden shifts and surges and unexpected loud noises. This creates continuous sensory demand, which forces the brain to try to filter, prioritize, reassess, and reorient over and over and over again. And that burns cognitive resources really fast. Crowds also generate emotional heat, anger, fear, frustration, or excitement, or unpredictability. And that emotional volume becomes cognitive load. Humans are wired to respond to emotional cues. In a crowd, those cues are amplified, and all of that goes to increase your stress hormones, your vigilance, your threat sensitivity, your emotional reactivity, all of which degrade performance over time. Now, crowds constantly shift. People step forward, people step back. Someone raises a sign, someone shouts, someone climbs on something, someone runs through the crowd. These are all absolute consistent tactics that we see used regularly, and they create these micro surprises. And the brain hates surprises. Every one of them, conscious, thought or not, it forces your brain to do a threat assessment or a reevaluation, or at least a shift in attention. And if you're doing that hundreds of times over and over the hours, your cognitive fatigue is going to skyrocket. There's the fact that crowds produce ambiguous information and purposely giving mixed signals. Is that person approaching, or are they just shifting position? Is that noise a threat, or is it just some sort of chant? Is that movement intentional, or was it accidental? Is that person emotional, or are they being aggressive? Ambiguity is one of the most draining cognitive stressors that you can face, and the brain burns enormous energy trying to interpret all of these unclear signals. High density environments, we know they're going to reduce people's visibility, their predictability, escape routes, spatial awareness. So the brain must constantly try to track proximity, monitor spacing, predict movement, and maintain orientation. And this is absolutely exhausting as well, again, when it's just spread out over time. Even if nothing violent is happening, the constant possibility of escalation, this just goes to create, the need for continuous vigilance and anticipatory stress and hyper monitoring and threat scanning loops. And all of that is one of the fastest ways to burn that cognitive bandwidth we're talking about. We know, and I'm sure we've all faced that, we fatigue faster when we can't control the pace or the noise or the temperature or movement or the timing or the proximity of others in crowds. All of that does is go to remove the control, and that loss of control equals an increased cognitive load. Cold, it's not just limited to temperature. Cold is a cognitive tax. It's, spend enough time on it, it is a performance threat. And while these protests are going on, this cold acts as a silent force multiplier. And here's what cold does to the human brain and the body. Cold burns energy faster. When you're exposed to cold, your body shifts into survival mode. It burns calories at a much higher rate just to try to maintain its core temperature. So that means the brain has fewer resources available for higher level thinking. And then beyond that, the cold slows your neural processing. Your cold literally slows down the speed at which your nerves transmit signals. So everybody's reaction time is going to increase. Your fine motor skills are going to degrade. Precision tasks become harder. And this is why people in the cold feel sluggish or foggy. It's not psychological. It is literally physiological. The cold narrows attention. When your body is fighting to stay warm, the brain automatically just prioritizes survival. Your scanning is going to decrease. Your awareness is going to narrow. People are going to become just simply more task fixed. And then 4, your cold reduces emotional regulation. Cold elevates stress hormones. It increases irritability. It reduces patience. It makes people much more reactive. And when you combine cold with long duration stress, emotional control becomes one of the first things to slip. And then I would say number 5 would be the fact that the cold makes communication harder. Cold affects the muscles in your face. It affects the muscles in your jaw, in your hands. Speech becomes less precise. Gestures become less controlled. And all that can lead to your radio work becoming more difficult. And when communication degrades, team awareness degrades with it. And then 6, I would say, is the fact that cold increases risk-taking, because as the body cools, people become more impulsive. They rush. They cut corners. They make decisions based on emotion instead of logic. And that's not because they're reckless, but because cold reduces the brain's ability to evaluate consequences. The brain interprets everything through a stress-amplified lens. And in a crowd, that environment, that matters. Cognitive fatigue doesn't hit us all at once. It builds gradually. The brain starts out strong, but as time goes on, you will start to see a pattern. You'll see the people operating with reduced attention spans. You will see, if you tried to test them, slower reaction times. They will be having difficulty processing new information. And there's going to be more reliance on habits instead of deliberate thinking. There's going to be more increased emotional reactivity. And here's the dangerous part. People often to themselves, think that they feel fine. They don't realize that their performance is dropping. The brain does a really good job at hiding its own decline. You'll think you're operating at 100%, but actually you're more like 60%. And when the brain is overloaded for long periods, it just starts cutting corners. It's just what it does. Not intentionally. It's just trying to survive the demand. Now, you can't eliminate fatigue, but the important thing is that you can manage it. If you do things like taking micro breaks, just short pauses to reset your brain, or conducting environmental resets, stepping into a quieter or brighter space. Also, keep in mind task rotation, so people can change their mental workload, and just checking in with teammates, because shared awareness distributes a load. Managing fatigue is all about being proactive and not reactive. The brain will fatigue. That's guaranteed. What matters is how you respond to it. Cognitive fatigue, it affects everyone. And I think understanding how it works can be a massive difference in awareness, communication, and decision-making. And when you look at real-world events and we apply it to real-world events like these Minneapolis ICE protests, you can see how fatigue shapes behavior on every side. So why this is still going on. I just wanted to get this out here and kind of address it and give you my thoughts on it and take the useful information we could from it and apply it for our own knowledge base. So guys, with that, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments as usual. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. Be safe.
Yeah, static buzz, frequencies clear. Ran squads like the danger is near. Radio waves, cut through the night. Tactical moves, we strike with might. Reach the door, flesh and clear. Echoes loud, in your ear, coordinates set, we move as one. Missions hot, the battle's won. Yeah, radio ran, we on the air, signal strong. We're everywhere, technical sound. The hype is live, friend don't stop. We strategize. Check your six, the shadows creep. Silent steps, we never sleep. Call the shots, the team's in sync. Radio crack, we're on the brink. Breach the door, flashing clear, echoes loud. In your ear, coordinates set, we move as one. Missions hop, the battle's won.